Further into the stage, the De Waal-McGregor Uno attacks the hills, taking the bends headlong at frightening speeds. Using both sides of the closed-off road, Peter keeps the Uno well in line and away from a fatal drop, impressing even the hardened Dave McGregor with his efforts. The Class A BMW of Norman Clark, now having taken third place away from Glyn Hall and Martin Botha. Overall leader is still the Pond Mortimer Ford Sapphire. Still near Pretoria, but a couple of stages later, it's to Gerotech and on to the high-speed banking. With more than one car on the circuit, things get a little tricky as we join Peter de Waal and Dave McGregor in their Uno, who are fast catching the Glyn Hall Martin Botha Golf.
Good evening to our viewers, and what a fantastic program we've got ahead of us tonight. In his absence, Clint Lingeveld unfortunately cannot join us tonight, and so you're stuck with me for the evening and our guest. And tonight, it's none other than Dave McGregor, whom we consider to be the Jean Todt of South African motorsport. Good evening to you,
You know
Dave.
what, Patrick? Luckily, I've got a bit of a tan, otherwise I'd be blushing. That's probably the best compliment I've ever been paid, but I don't think that's a mantle I deserve or earn. But thank you so much. And may I say, first of all, to Witzenberg and to your whole efforts and your program, what an absolute stunning pleasure it is for you to be preserving all these chats with all the people that you're talking to. And I've got to say, I love that picture behind you. That is just amazing. And that's the reason why I'm so passionate about the sport. It's just, it gives me goosebumps seeing it there behind you. So thank you for that.
10 points for making that remark, because we are rally fanatics, of course. And so that is top priority as far as motorsport is concerned. The man that you're driving with in that picture is Koos Roos, the late Koos Roos. And those skylines made the most beautiful sound of any rally car ever. It's a very special era of South African motorsport. So let's start off there. Take us back into your rallying career. We'll touch on all the other stuff, but of course, with myself being a navigator, I've got to give you credit as a navigator. Stuff the drivers who say that you only ballast in the motor car. If you look at what navigators have achieved, we just mentioned Jean Todt. He's the top man in the FIA. You have achieved some amazing things in South African motorsport, and I have to credit you as a navigator.
Well, I have to say, Patrick, that I think those drivers, and I had the privilege of going with a host of South Africa's top drivers. If I think the likes of Hannes Grobler, he and I won the production car championship in a Nissan in 1998. I started off with Eddie Ruiz, who was a Portuguese guy who used to help me at Kyalami. He introduced me into rallying. But let me take it even further back. The first thing I did was I started marshalling, because you remember Total Rally, you used to be given petrol coupons. So when you marshaled, you'd be given these petrol coupons, and you could, if you drove a small car and you used your petrol coupons well, it could last you another month, and you'd go all the way down to the old LM. And so that's where my passion for motorsport began. I always wanted to drive, but of course you needed the budgets. And then I was very fortunate to be invited by Eddie Ruiz to come and try out navigating for him. And from the very first time we were in the Sabi Forest, I was hooked. I then went with people like Jojo Loopstra, who I'm sure we'll talk about. He and I were lying second overall in a Sabi event, and I think our enthusiasm exceeded our ability by quite a few points. And we had a serious shunt. But you know what, I was already busy. I wasn't focused as a navigator. I was already writing the press release to say how fantastic these privateers were. And I took my eye off the ball and we had a major incident. So that's the rallying. And then, of course, through people with Hannes, with Nuno de Cunha, with Cassie Coetzee, I'd forgotten about Nick de Waal and that little Uno. My goodness, I mean, we sat cheek by jowl in that thing. It was tiny. I think our shoulders rubbed. I was probably ballast in that little Uno. But that thing could motor. And looking at going around Geritech, I remember how scared I was because I thought this thing's on little Mari biscuit wheels. What happens if we have a blowout? Anyway, it didn't happen. And so I think for navigators, as you rightfully said, I think our drivers put the fear of God into us, and that's why we were so focused always. And you'll always notice, Patrick, it's always the damage on the driver's side, never on the navigator's side. But having said that, we really, I've had that privilege of being with some of South Africa's greatest rally drivers, and it is the passion. So starting with marshalling and then sitting next to these great guys and being able to just enjoy the sound of those rocks and things being thrown up and under the bottom of that Nissan Skyline. We had to turn the intercoms up to maximum so that we could hear each other. And just the sound, and of course the people, you'd spray them with, and I'm not talking stones, I'm talking rocks. Those guys used to dig rocks out of the ground. And they were just an absolute sheer pleasure. And I suppose one must admit that was just the most amazing golden era of motorsport that we've ever had. And it was a pleasure to be part of it.
You've experienced it from all sides of the coin. You did the rallying in the rear-wheel drive era of the Skylines. You went into the front-wheel drive era with a little, as you just mentioned, the little dinky toy Unos, which were not slow. They were scary quick.
Yeah.
But then you took it one step further. You even organized rallies into Swaziland, like the Castro, in I think it was 92 or 90, 1980 to 1983. You were the boss man of the Castro Rally. Now, that to many of us will always remain the ultimate rally in South Africa. It was something unique. It was extremely tough. Your take on the format change from these endurance events, which had 40 stages, to what we have today, which is basically a couple of stages being repeated, but all about being maximum sprint races.
Yeah, I think before I leave that, I must mention that I had retired from rallying and I was sitting comfortably in my office at Kyalami, and one Mr. Johan Evertser walked in one day and said, "I'd like to buy you a coffee." And we went up the road and had a coffee, and he said, "Listen, I've got this young guy that's coming through the development program. His name's Gugu Zulu, and I think I'd like you to take out your overall out the cupboard and dust it off and come and help this young man understand and see what he's like in rally." So having retired, being a navigator for these fantastic drivers, I now found myself in the Volkswagen junior team. And I think I must have been in my middle 50s, and I'm in the Volkswagen junior team. How ironic was that? Anyway, Gugu took it in his pace, and let me tell you what a fine driver we had in front wheel. He adapted so quickly. I see behind you some pictures too of Gugu and I going around in our little Volkswagen Golf. And that guy, it's just such a tragedy that his picture came into the frame when it did at Kilimanjaro, because he would have been one of Africa's top all-round sportsmen and just a fun guy to be with. We had so much fun. I mean, I remember at one stage he used to have dreadlocks. So we went to scrutineering and to documentation, and I put dreadlocks on as well. So he had me in the dreadlocks and himself, and people thought, and it was actually on a Cape Town event. There's always a good sense of humor down in the Cape. And Gugu was a man who matured so quickly and used to listen. He tried to do the Scandinavian flick because, you know, he also was part of Sarel van der Merwe's circuit team. And he tried to do it once going up a hill. And of course, we just ran out of steam. And I said to him, "No, come on, Gugu, man, really, I'm really going to have to sort you out." And we had this fun in the car. It was just such a nice time of my life, and also to be part of a junior team. I mean, that was the ultimate compliment. So yes, that was something that was very, very special. Now we've gone around in such a long circle that I have to come back to the Castro Rally. And I think that the Castro Rally in its time was one of the world's toughest, and I think it ranked up with the Safari Rally that used to be run in Kenya. Because remember, we had that infamous T Road. And I remember we're talking a lot about Cyril, but he came out of that T Road stage. It was the most scary granite boulders and drops, and we had a lot of overseas competitors. And we were trying to get the Castrol included in the World Championship in 1982 and 83. But the one thing I must say about the Castrol, I had a fantastic group of people around me, from the arrowers to the marshals to everybody who worked on that event, to the competitors. Was an absolute pleasure. And that Castro was run to international standards with, I think it brought in the new timing system. Remember in the old days, Patrick, when we used to rally, you had the old clock cards, and you had those funny little Odos that used to be on a cable off the front wheel, and the coffee grinders. It's just frightening to think how it has evolved. And in those days, they were sprints, not sprints, they were endurance events. I mean, we used to get those guys going on those events for up to 16 hours of driving without a break. I mean, it was just incredible. But I think that's what makes events classic and epic. You think of the Dakar when it was going through Africa, it was epic. It was just, to finish was an honor. The Roof of Africa in Lesotho is the same. And the Castro was an epic. But I think that those epic events were built for that time and that period. I mean, the works teams were going through a set of tires on a 35-kilometer stage. It became very expensive. It became very difficult to find sponsors for those long, drawn-out events. So I think that the current organizers have actually adapted to the changing circumstances and still providing a spectacle for spectators and for the younger guys to come and cut their teeth and to enjoy rallying. One must, in life, they say that the rear view mirror is small and the windscreen is big. And there's a reason for that. The reason is that you look forward, you don't look backwards. But I think we need to accept that that was a good foundation to build the sport in the country. It gave us a lot of qualified drivers who then were comfortable to go overseas. It adapted to pace notes. So the rally scene in South Africa, I think, is only in a difficult stage because of the costs and the fact that it's become a very expensive sport, and sponsors are also cutting their pie into smaller and smaller pieces. But I have no doubt that the resilience of competitors and organizers in this country will make sure that one day we will possibly have a safari-type rally, albeit more on a sprint stage, in South Africa again. That's certainly, I think it's possible.
I must agree. A lot of prophets of doom about rallying at the moment, but it's got all the potential to grow again. South Africans don't give up easily, so we'll get that foundation down again. And rallying is already making good progress again. Yeah, in the Western Cape, it's getting stronger with every event. And I would like to believe that one day we'll see the manufacturers back at national level again.
I think that's possible. Everything in life, and you'll know this too, Patrick, and so will the people, viewers, and they'll understand that nothing comes easy. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. So that's why it's difficult. So what we need to do is we need to find the young talent in South Africa that are prepared to do what the Tony Balls did, and what Dieter Koch and myself and those that were involved in organizing rallies, going out and creating relationships with property owners. And that's what it's all about. But it's jolly damn hard work. And I think that if we can find that crop of youngsters who have the enthusiasm, I think the other problem is, Patrick, we came out of an era of strong motorsport clubs. I mean, we used to have our monthly noggins, and we used to be able to draw on all sorts of strengths of people to come and help. You can't do these things on your own. You need a whole team of people that are committed and make these things happen. So I think one of the problems is that the clubs have actually been weakened over the years. And if we can get something like that going again, this country is made for motorsport. I mean, look at our international drivers. We're batting way above our league, and we can do it. You're right. We're resilient. We're South African. Of course, we can do it.
You've touched on many topics now, and unfortunately, we don't have to limit this to one program with you. So let's touch on something that I feel is very important. And your CV can keep us busy all night just reading through it. But the bottom line is, Dave McGregor has achieved or has led teams to do marvelous things in South African motorsport. And shoot me for saying this, but I feel that's when one of the biggest shortcomings in South African motorsport is the ability to market yourself in motorsport, to grow your own image in the sport, and taking that to the next level with sponsors and series and that type of thing. But there's no Dave McGregor school out there for the youngsters to learn what you did, how you achieved these fantastic events, made them happen. Would you be in agreement that there's a bit of a shortcoming in that element?
Yeah, I think that, the problem is that a lot of people getting involved are so busy working on their cars and trying to get by on their housekeeping budget. I think if some of our wives knew what we spent on motorsport, I think there could be some serious debates around the country. But let me tell you, I can't blame the guys because they are so hard at work trying to just get their car to the start line. But you're right. I think there is a gap, and maybe, who knows, maybe Witzenberg Motor through this program can run a series of tutorials where we help youngsters. We just talk to them. In my mind, motor racing or an organizer or what I've been able to achieve is only because I've been the conductor of the orchestra. And when you conduct an orchestra, you've got to have a whole group of people playing different instruments to their best strengths. And you've got to make sure they all play together and that you make that beautiful music. So for me, I'm the conductor. I've the privilege of being a conductor, but all the hard work is actually being done by the people beating the drums and blowing the trumpets and playing the violins. That's what motorsport's all about.
Well, you're very humble approach here. But for a man that started off selling programs at Kyalami and becoming the managing director for 20 years, that's no small claim to make. What did it take to walk that distance from selling programs to becoming the managing director? Do you prefer that side of the coin, or would you have liked to stay involved as a driver or a navigator?
Well, Patrick, I say that if you can look at things from both sides of the windscreen, you can be a good competitor and you can be a good organizer, because you can see it from both sides of the table. So to me, that was very important, to understand what competitors go through and to have a little bit of compassion with the challenges that they face, but also to have the firmness, because you've been there yourself and you know that if you get given an opportunity to nick a second off a marshal, you're going to try your luck as well. So, you need to understand both sides of the coin, and that turns you into a good organizer and into a good competitor, depending which way you go. In my case, very fortunate to go into both, and that was what gave me the experience to do it. But I think that, there's from starting off with program selling at Kyalami, it was because I was a part of the SCC Pretoria branch, and we used to have our annual prize giving. And, the guys in Pretoria can save. So now we needed extra funds so that we could have decent prize giving. So what happened is we went to Francis Tucker in Johannesburg, and we told him, we will come and sell your programs for 10% commission, and we will put that money into the prize giving, and you can come and attend our prize giving and see that we are spending the money as we earn it. So we sold programs like, we were so organized. We had a caravan, we did things. So I love that you stand in the rain, you meet all the people, You find them hiding in the boot of the car and you don't say anything because the gatekeepers haven't spotted it. And that's where I cut my teeth and understood how things on the ground work at Kyalami. So when I was running the place, I told the guys, you better check in the boot of the car. These guys have got more moves than a Swiss watch. And if you don't go and check it out. So I've been there. I know what the tricks are. So selling programs gave me that experience. I was just very fortunate to work my way up the food chain in the SEC Pretoria. And then when the big Kyalami takeover came about, I think the threatening bankruptcy of SEC Joburg, and we formed a club called Motorsport 2000 and tried to create commercial viability at Kyalami so that racing could continue and that it didn't become another shopping mall. So that's the passion that drove me. I was scared because I accepted that Kyalami in Zulu means my home. And I didn't want Kyalami to be lost to motor racing. And there was a time when it was actually going to be sold. I mean, half of it was sold off to Amaprop, to Anglo-American Property Development. So there was a time when Kyalami was under severe threat. And I think that all those different roles that I was exposed to helped me to fight that good fight at the end of the day. Well, I think it was a good fight. I know there's a lot of criticism about what we did to change the track, but we preserved the track. And I always said that we'll keep that piece that was left after Amaprop cut the top piece off. That if somebody came back in 50 years and drilled down into the tar in Clubhouse Corner, the tar right at the bottom would be the 1960 tar that was there. All the layers on top would be the years. And that's a fact. That's what's happened.
Take us to that, Jere. I share your sympathy with the loss of the regional circuit. Was it just a business decision?
Yeah, it's a long story and it'll take a whole program, but I'm going to try and shorten it down to, in 1985, the Formula One was held at Kyalami. And when the deal was signed with Bernie Eccleston, the rand was at about 98 cents to the dollar. And that was when the contract was signed. By the time, there was a massive collapse in 1985 in the financial. There was the thin rand and all the things in South Africa. So when the Grand Prix came to be hosted in March, the rand had collapsed, and I think it was like 35 cents to the dollar. And Bernie is a businessman. He said, listen, you've got to pay. You guys have got to pay for this Grand Prix. And the only way to pay for the Grand Prix was and that was when it was still run by the Sports Car Club. And the Sports Car Club didn't have the wherewithal. How were the directors, people like Francis Tucker and Mike Reed, who put so much into the sport, were going to be held liable in their personal capacities for the loss of money? Now, that wouldn't have been fair. They would have been ruined. Their families, they would be bankrupt. So that's when Motorsport 2000 was formed and decided to do a deal with Bernie to say, Bernie, we'll put this track back on a commercial basis so that we can run the Grand Prix, so that we can pay our debts. And we did that negotiation, and then we had to sell the top portion of the track to Amaprop. So he took ownership of paid SEC R1 for the track and took over the ownership. Then Bobby Hartsleaf came and managed the track, and it ran in that state until 1988. Bernie was then paid by Amaprop, and they took the top section of the track, and we started redeveloping and keeping and preserving the racetrack for motor racing in South Africa. That's a very short synopsis. I won't tell you about the meetings we held in a 40-foot container in the pitch dark with the door closed with Bernie. When he said, if you guys don't pay me, I'm not going to take my cars out of the garage. And we had a very sharp lawyer, Mervyn Key, who I worked for, who was actually in charge of the Grand Prix and Kyalami and seeing what was happening. And he said to Bernie in that container, Bernie, guess what? If your cars don't come out of those pits and start this race, they won't be leaving this country. We'll impound them. It's the first time I've ever seen Bernie outthought. And we had that Grand Prix in 85, but then, of course, we couldn't pay, and we were going into the whole pressure of cutting sporting ties with South Africa. So it took us a while to get it back, and the naysayers said we'd never do it, and we did. We brought it back. But that again is another story. So I don't know how much we want to talk about one. There's plenty to chat about.
At this stage, I think touching on the surface is fine. We can leave the detailed ones for later because there's so much more to chat about. Let's go Motor Grand Prix, MotoGP.
Yeah, well, let me tell you something. I must say that those are gladiators. How those guys stay on those bikes. The MotoGP, we ran at Kyalami again in 1992. It then went on to go to Pakisa. MotoGP for me was always an absolute pleasure because those guys are like warriors. They are like horsemen on them and the bike is one, and they are the bravest guys. I mean, in those days, now they do have a bit more spinal protection. I mean, you see that big Teflon hump on their back that they can slide on. But in those days, the curbs were there. We had, even in the beginning, we used to have catch fences at Kyalami, and we used to have to put straw bales in front of them. How we actually got through that era alive is actually a miracle with the way, we used to have bikes running on the same track with catch fencing, and but it all happened. It was all entertaining. The crowds loved it. People turned up. But MotoGP to me was really, I have the utmost respect. I love Formula One. Love the sound of the cars. Love what the characters, the personalities, the Schumachers and the Sennas and Nelson Piquet and all the tricks they got up to. You must remember they came out for testing a lot. And when they come out for testing, they don't have those hordes of PR people flocking around them and checking every sentence they say and what they do. And so when they were out here testing, they were just like you and I, naughty as hell. I mean, Nelson Piquet was he was an absolute joker. Gerhard Berger, man, we had such fun. They were a different class, but the motorbike or the MotoGP guys, brave hearts, every one of them. Just to be on that starting group took a lot of guts.
Just standing at the end of the old Kyalami straight at the 50-meter marker board, and watching those bikes come into Crowthorne on the brakes, on the front wheel, they actually lifted the rear wheel over 300 k's an hour. It is mind-boggling to think it's the palm of your hand is bigger than the surface of the tire touching the road. And legends like Barry Sheen and those guys, we saw them in South Africa. We had the best.
Corky Bellington.
Not even mentioning the South African guys achieving marvelous results overseas.
Not from the Binder brothers now carrying the flag. I mean, what an absolute pleasure. We need a MotoGP back in this country.
Something I find ironic of that era, though, is you had somebody like Jody Scheckter. I had the privilege to be at Kyalami in '79 when Gilles won the race, but he never beat him to the title. Jody won the title. And so I got to see a rare occurrence, a 1-2 for Ferrari in South Africa.
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make here is Jody achieved the result in world motorsport at the time. But almost got no credit for it in the country because the country was in a bit of a turmoil. So it's sad because he truly put South Africa on the motorsport map.
He did indeed, and he's not the only one who suffered from that. Sarel is probably our best known driver locally and internationally. But you think of the achievements of people like Janelle de Villiers on Dakar, Alfie Cox. I mean, we have got guys who, like Jody, just have never been acknowledged at home. I mean, I couldn't believe you could go into a shopping center with Janelle de Villiers after having won the Dakar in South Africa, and few people would recognize him. Yet he'd walk around in Paris at the Tour de France at a cycling event, and everybody was flocking around him and getting his autographs and signatures. So it is sad that we have never created that platform. And I think it goes back to your question earlier where you said we don't really know how to promote ourselves and to sell ourselves. And obviously, somebody has to do the hard work. Somebody has to phone TV and say, listen, do you know that Janelle de Villiers won the Dakar? And we used to do that. I used to have on speed dial. I had all the Sunday Times people's phone numbers, the TV people, and you have to do the hard work. You can't sit back and say, well, I won the event and now I'm going to sit in my office and wait for them to come streaming in the door. You've got to get out there and phone them and have relationships. And that is sad that Jody and our other champions in South Africa haven't been given the local recognition that they deserve. But we know where the problem is. Let's fix it.
Yeah. Well, hats off to people, like as you said, Corky Bellington, John Heckerold. There's so many to mention, even Paddy Driver. Who's we're fortunate to have him around still. But it's awesome to see what we've achieved. And now with the youngsters, like we always seem to think Formula One is the pinnacle of motorsport. But you don't have to go into Formula One to become an international star in the sport. And I think the Van der Lindes, the Jordan Peppers are proving that finally, that you can make, somebody whom I have great respect for his achievements is David Perel, who came out of nowhere. And today he's a works Ferrari driver. So hats off to these guys. It's we almost Wayne Taylor. There's another name, George Fisher. I see there's some comments from the behind the scenes here.
The Linda brothers.
So many to mention. So I'm afraid we're not going to have enough time tonight, but we're touching on the correct subjects. Unfortunately, we do know the director of Premier Sport and Entertainment, and he'll set the matter straight somewhere along the line.
No pressure. No
pressure at all. Take us to another very special event. You mentioned Janelle taking overall victory in Dakar. I think it was 2007 for Volkswagen. But before that, we had the privilege of actually having the race finish in Cape Town.
It's another long story, and I'm going to try and keep it short, Patrick. We were busy rebuilding Kyalami in 1992 to get ready for the return of the Formula One Grand Prix. And I think I was in my office at 11 o'clock at night having a meeting with everybody about are we going to get this track finished in time. And Mervyn Key walked in. He was a director of MRE that actually owned the track. And he said, listen, you guys, you seem to be sitting here talking. I think we should, it's not like you've got anything to do. Maybe we should put in a bid to run the last leg from the Namibian border to Cape Town for the Paris-Le Cap, because at that stage the event was going to change its whole complexion and go from Paris all the way down Africa and finish in Cape Town. And he actually signed us up, and we didn't have the time really to do that, but we did it. We went down. We did the survey from the border from Namibia down that beautiful west coast all the way to Cape Town to finish near Woodbridge Island. And of course, we had all the greenies were saying we're going to be running on the beaches and they were going to lie in front of the trucks. And we're trying to organize a Formula One Grand Prix, build the track. This event was in January and the Formula One was in March. It was, I think we worked 20 hours a day on both those events. But the nicest thing was seeing those massive big trucks and all of the Paris-Dakar, Paris-Le Cap cars coming in, and the bikes, and the vibe in Cape Town was just amazing. It was incredible. And unfortunately, I think there were so many logistical problems getting through Africa that it was a once-off. But thank goodness we were involved in that once-off. So it happened once, and we were there, and we delivered. And South Africa, as you say, Patrick, I don't know where we pull these things out of the hat, but we pulled another rabbit out the hat, and I think put on a finish that they still talk about today, because it was spectacular. We had to turn the finishing podium because the Cape doctor came in and blew so much cloud over the mountain. We had this beautiful podium with a backdrop of Table Mountain, and we had to turn the whole stage to face a different direction because you couldn't see Table Mountain. That was just one of the logistical problems right at the finish, but great times.
Well, it was an eye-opener for many of us because we had the privilege to go up to Springbok to meet them coming across the border. And then tried to follow these fire engines that was turned into race trucks on the open road, and it turned into an impossible race because we would be doing, I don't know whether I should be saying this over social media, but we were doing 200 k's an hour, and these trucks would come wallowing past us and still waving at us, don't look like they're trying even. It was incredible to see how fast a real truck could go. And the even from a competitor's point of view, you know, half of those guys are French. You don't understand a word they're saying. But coming into the country, they almost felt like they're part of the local scene. It was fantastic to have them here. And the bikers would willingly do wheelies and get the crowd involved. And it was awesome. I even had a Skellum drive in one of the Mitsubishis the Sunday after the event, which was fantastic.
Excellent. Well, never a man to miss an opportunity, I see.
No, absolutely not. Those things, I knew it's a rare opportunity and made a nuisance of myself until I got into the seat, and it was fantastic.
That's excellent.
But yeah, we can carry on about that all night as well. But now let's go one other element that's not as well known in South Africa. The LTEC Formula One two-seaters.
Yeah, the LTEC Formula One ×2. Now, let me tell you, that was another interesting thing. That was to bring all of the old legends out of retirement, the Nigel Mansells and the Andrettis and a whole lot of them, and get them to come and race in a car. So there were 8 cars that were converted. I think they were old, they were Arrows, if I'm not mistaken. They put a second seat in behind the driver, and they ran a race with a passenger sitting behind. And we brought them out to South Africa. We did a whole lot of concerts for the Nelson Mandela Children's Foundation, and Celine Dion came out and singers. It was a whole massive promotion, and it all culminated in the race around Kyalami in these 8 cars with the old legends driving and a passenger in the back seat. I think they did something like 12 laps. It must have been fantastic for the passengers. We had lucky draws who could go, and for charity, some paid, so we donated the money to the Mandela Children's Fund. But that was just an year, and I remember we were doing a signing of photographs of the drivers like Nigel Mansell, and sitting at the Mandela Square in Sandton. And one of the media guys actually asked him, said, listen, how do you find South Africa? And he was talking, and we found out that Nigel Mansell, believe it or not, has actually got a good sense of humor, because he said, the journalist said to him, how's it going? I believe you playing a bit of golf and that sort of thing. He said, yeah, I am actually. I got arrested the other day. And the journalist said, why? So he said, because I was hooking on the back 9. So who would have thought? Who would have thought Nigel Mansell, who would have a sense of humor? Then suddenly you realize, you know what, these guys, it's memories that you're always gonna enjoy, and I love sharing them with you, because these are things that I haven't often spoken about, and it's just so great to be able to share them and let people enjoy them as well, I hope.
Well, then we can touch on the fact that you were actually invited to go and drive a Formula. You turned down the invitation to drive a Formula One car.
Oh my God! I was hoping you wouldn't bring that up. I mean, that is dedication. Now these young guys who are watching mustn't think that it's all glory and glamour. So I used to sit in my office, and then guys would come in and throw their race keys on the desk and say, "Hey man, go and take it for a spin." And I'd always be too busy if I'm not organizing something for the program or something for the track or going to a protest hearing or something. You never had the opportunity. So when the Benetton team were out here testing, Thierry Boutsen said to me, you know what, you've treated us so well. You South Africans are nearly as good as us Belgians in terms of entertaining people. He said, you've taken us to dinners, you've chatted, you've taken us to your homes, you've welcomed us. I think we want to give you the opportunity to drive our car on 1 lap. You have to go very slowly, but you can take it for 1 lap. And you know what? I actually turned it down. I cannot, to this day, I cannot believe it. I cannot believe that I said, thank you so much. That's very kind of you. But out of respect for your car, I'm not going to do that. And if I had that chance today, not only would I drive it, I would smoke it. I would drive it around that track like I'd stolen it. Trust me.
You've met some incredible people in your time. Let's stick to Formula One drivers at the moment. Who would you consider to be, personality-wise, the ace in the pack?
Out of the current drivers?
Well, no, in your era.
In my era. Well, I would say that it was a toss-up between Nelson Piquet. Nelson Piquet is just, you know what, he told me a story. He was here testing as well. And his car broke down up at Crowthorne, and he got all his mechanics came running up to push the car back to the pits. And he was walking at the back with a long piece of grass that he pulled out, and he was like whipping them like slaves to push his car back. He threw a stink bomb in their car and locked all the doors. He was always full of nonsense. So Nelson Piquet was a character of absolute note. I enjoyed the time with Nigel. He was a great guy, and Gerhard Berger, because he was tall. You know, all these guys are short. They're like jockeys, and Gerhard Berger was a bit taller than the rest of them. He was also, so if I had to rate them as fun people, I think it would be Nelson Piquet would be top just in terms of fun. But if I had to rate them in terms of their personality, driving ability, I was very fortunate to be able to spend time with Michael Schumacher, because he told me how he started doing karting, came out to South Africa for a karting race at Swartkops. And while all the works teams guys were getting new tires, he went into the pile of old tires at the back that they had all thrown away and was choosing his tires to put on his kart. So, you know, those are just lovely stories that a lot of people don't know. And I think when you think of Schumacher having to do that, that's clearly why he became such a good driver. Arrogant, but I mean, if you're a world champion, I think you have to be a little bit arrogant.
No, not with a chip on your shoulder. But you got to believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will.
Yeah, that's true.
We've just mentioned motorsport's expensive, and it's a challenge to find sponsors. Yet you pulled another rabbit out of the hat. You brought $1 million worth of prize money to a series at KLR. Now, you make it sound easy.
You know what, Patrick? Life is good sometimes, man. We had to do something. So the SEC sold the Kyle Army racetrack to Bernie for R1, and Bernie took over the debt, and the debt was huge. So a motor club was formed called Motorsport 2000, and that was in 1985. So Motorsport 2000 sounded like a long way away, and look how far behind it is already. So we formed this motorsport club called Motorsport 2000, and there was a company called Motor Racing Enterprises that then took over the running of the track from a financial point of view. So what we said is, if we're going to attract competitors to Motorsport 2000, we need to look after the competitor. We need to make sure they get paid traveling money. We need to be made sure that they're not the clowns in the circus. They're there to put on the act, but they needn't pay for the privilege of putting the act on. So we decided to put together a package. And because we were a commercial operation, we were a bit like Bernie when he took over Formula One and FISA, the old FISA in those days under Jean-Marie Balest, saw them as a threat because they were making the money and they were the sporting body and they wanted to control it. And so we were a bit like Bernie. We realized that we're going to have to get the competitors on our side and get them to join the club and to appreciate that Kyalami is there for them and for their benefit. And so we went to see a very good friend of Kyalami, a man by the name of Dennis Meister, who owned Yellow Pages. And we spoke to him and we told him about our dream of bringing a Formula One back to South Africa, which everybody at that stage, I mean, we just lost the Grand Prix in '85. Everybody thought we'd never see it back again. I said, no, that is just being babysat. Our Grand Prix is being babysat by these other circuits. We are going to get it back. And to get it back, we need a long-term plan, which we eventually ended up with the K plan. But in 1985, we said, let's start fixing the local motorsport first. So Dennis Meister very kindly agreed to put up R1 million prize money, which we then put into a series of 6 races, because we were also being pressurized. People were saying there's no certainty in Kyalami. All the other circuits wanted our dates. So we thought the only way we can survive is we have to put on events to attract sponsors, to keep our sponsors happy. So we created our own thing called the Yellow Pages Challenge, and we ran 6 races at Kyalami. Some of them were part of a national race day and some were standalone. And to get the competitors to support us and to take part, we put up the R1 million prize money. And what a difference that made, because suddenly competitors were being treated like professionals and like guys who deserve not to just win a little trophy that they can take home onto the mantle, but can actually earn some money. And that was the turning point in the relationship between the competitors, because everybody was very negative at that stage. Everybody felt the track was going to close and there was no point in running races there. And we turned it around. We proved that if you have a long-term plan and you put your shoulder to the wheel and you've got your orchestra there and they're all playing the right tune, you can do it. And I think the competitors still remember fondness. We even put a swimming pool in behind the pit complex for them, so that when they wanted to relax between races, they had a swimming pool. We tried to create the old Kyalami Ranch feel. That wasn't as successful as I thought it would be, but we tried. We gave it our best shot. And we, in those days, R1 million was a lot of money. It was a big prize. That's for sure.
Now, not a fair question to put to you, but I know what you're busy with, and we'll touch on that later. Do you see a Formula One Grand Prix coming back to South Africa in the future?
Well, Patrick, I know that there are a number of consortiums who would certainly like to bring it back. I think it's a very long shot, because I think that it's become very expensive. It's almost become too expensive for private companies to be able to sponsor. Bernie Eccleston once said to me that if you make money out of my Grand Prix, I'm not charging you enough. That was from the horse's mouth. He said to me, since we've gone to the Middle East and to Turkey, the guys are paying me $40 million for an event. I can't come to South Africa for $5 million anymore. And that's why in 93 we actually again lost the Grand Prix, because there was just too much competition. And he said governments actually now pay for Grand Prix. So I find it very difficult to be able to understand how we in South Africa will be able to, and I understand all the benefits and the VAT and I can make a good case for the Grand Prix, but politically it's very difficult to be able to, when you've got so many hungry people, to justify putting government money in, and it would take big government money. So I wish the guys the best of luck. I think if they can find a combination of support from the government and support from big international corporations, we could have it. I mean, Kyalami's up to it. It could, with a few minor changes, could host it. And we'll just have to wait and see and leave it in the hands of those guys who are negotiating now.
The other big race at Kyalami, if I can put it that way, has always been the 9-hour endurance racing. Certainly another classic, certainly another awesome event in South Africa. And I know the Europeans used to enjoy coming to South Africa for the Springbok series. Now we've got the GT3 series, or GT3 Intercontinental race at Kyalami in a 9-hour format again. Would that be another direction to go into? Honestly, I'm an endurance racing fan. I really feel it brings a different perspective to motorsport altogether. And it also allows a far greater amount of international people to participate in the same event.
You know, and the other thing, Patrick, is I think that's a good holding operation. If we say we want to go into a holding pattern, possibly to host the Formula One in the future. And why I say that is because a lot of South African drivers, and we mentioned them at the start of the show, including guys like Gennaro Bonafide and a few others too, can get the opportunity to share drive with an international team. So that was also in the 9-hour. You got South Africans not only entering their own cars. You think of those little Datsun 120Ys and what they achieved, and the old Renault Gordinis. I mean, it was just awesome stuff. But I think that this format is good because it's like the supercars of today, so you can relate to them. You've got the Bentleys and you've got the BMWs, and we've got good South African drivers taking part internationally that can come home and entertain us at home. So for me, that's an excellent holding opportunity because it's a lot more affordable and it can be exciting. So it needs to go a little bit more into the night, I think, so that you can get the spectacle of the lights and that rear brake drum shining red in the dark. But I think there's a good place for it. I think it's a great holding operation.
I'm jumping around a little bit. You were part of the evolvement of Kyalami into its current format, but you were also involved in other circuits. I was very fond of the old driving element at Swartkop, a challenging corner past that screen at the bottom, a very different type of circuit, but also a different level of motorsport. That's club motorsport like we have at Killarney. I think the two circuits match up very nicely in what it presents to the public. Yeah,
I've got a lovely story to tell you, and I'm going to share this with you. And I'm waffling a lot, so please forgive me. But you know, the old Swartkop circuit, we couldn't get access anymore to the go-kart track. So Motorsport 2000, because I was running Kyalami, we pulled a slenter of note. There used to be a part where the exit and the entry road came quite close together. In fact, I think they were about 30 meters apart. And so what we did as Motorsport 2000 is we went and tarred that little piece. We made a hairpin because the karting guys didn't want the cars and the bikes to race there anymore. So we went and we made a shortcut on the entrance road and the exit road where they came together. We put a little hairpin in, we tarred it. And then it was so dangerous that because I was running Kyalami at the time, you'll never believe this, and I don't know if I should even be saying it. I think it's too far. Nobody can prosecute me now. But there used to be the Boy Scouts. There used to be the Boy Scouts used to keep the lap boards at Kyalami, if you remember, in the 9 hour. There's a massive board in the Boy Scouts just at the kink. And at the kink, there was Armco to protect the Boy Scouts and the scoreboard from any cars that may go out of control. So what Piet Swanepoel and I used to do is we buried the stays for the Armco in the Swartkop's track. Then on a Friday night, we used to unbolt all the Armco at Kyalami that used to protect the Boy Scouts because they weren't there anymore. And we'd cart it in a bakkie to Swartkop's, and overnight we'd install it there. And Saturday we'd race and have our race meeting. And Saturday night we'd unbolt all that Armco and take it back to Kyalami and put it back in place. And that's how we, on a shoestring budget, how we made Swartkop's into just a holding pattern so people could still race and have fun. We did some crazy things.
Well, you also put another series on the go there that was fantastic, the Ultimoil Super Saloons with the likes of the David de Villiers twin turbo Alpha that Glenn Gibbons used to drive.
Yes.
It was awesome racing there.
It was. I mean, the characters, you know what, one thing about motor racing and motorsport, you get rogues and villains and heroes. There's all three all wrapped up into one. And in fact, we used to actually promote it. We used to have them doing arm wrestling on the bonnet of a car for front page publicity in the Sunday Times, and we'd get one guy like Reggie Roots to be the villain, and we'd get maybe Dion Joubert to be the hero, and it was just good times, great times.
Any particular series that you've been involved with that you would consider the absolute highlight?
Well, I'm going to actually take a bow for the orchestra here and say that I think when we put the Vodacom Power Tour together, which was a road show of 6 series, including motorbikes, we had the V8s, we had the bikes, we had the super singles, we had the Formula, and you remember we had the Vodacom Super Sport. and we had the GTIs, we had Formula Ford, and we put that all together in a package, and we took that around the country under the banner of the Vodacom Power Tour. Patrick, we've never had so much fun for those 5 years, because that tour went from circuit to circuit, and we organized proper prize givings. We made sure that there was proper branding. We brought television to the circuits. It was the most amazing combination of racing that I think we've ever put together, apart from the Springbok series, which was more of a specialized type of racing. This covered open wheel, saloons, and bikes, all in the same fruit salad. And that fruit salad, we used to mix it up, and man, it used to entertain. The crowds used to pour in, and those parties afterwards, the prize givings they almost became legendary. And that was the one series that I think ultimately I ever had the most fun with.
You touched on another thing that I firmly believe in as well, whether they really are that or not. But the hero and villain element in South African motorsport has always been great. You've had Sarel and Ian and the legendary Regmaker at Kyalami. It doesn't matter whether they really hated each other or not, but they created a vibe. The John Love, Dave Charlton era. You can go on and mention many of those eras. The saloon car era, it was Tony Viana, Nico Bianco, Abel de Oliveira. Ben Morgenroth, Willie Eben in the modifieds. You can create many of those. It's sort of lacking in today's motorsport. It's gone a bit cold, and that needs to be revived again. It's not just about the car; it's about these characters, people associated with these characters.
Yeah. Well, I think you can remember, I know it happened at Killarney, it happened a lot at Kyalami, is that you used to get the Opel Club would come and put beer cans in the fence and spell out Opel, and then next door would be the BMW Club, and they'd put BMW in, and they would be tossing insults between them, and that was just good, clean fun. I think that, the trouble is that people are so careful with what they say nowadays. If you say something in the wrong gender, you can be hauled before some sort of court, and you've got to be so careful. And I think a lot of that fun has been subdued because people are afraid of stepping out of line, and the sponsors taking umbrage. Or social media has also become, as much as I love it and as much as we're enjoying it and capturing all these memories and chats, social media in wrong hands can also turn what some competitor does against him. And so I think people are very conservative and withdrawn and don't do what they used to do, because in those days it was word of mouth. now it's cell phone footage, unfortunately. I think that's
my first experiences of the old Kyalami was up at Leeuwkop, and there was a tremendous atmosphere there. From Friday night, many of us slept over at the circuit.
I bet you crawled under the fence as well. I mean, you're one of those guys who came in under the fence. We had to have shepherd dogs there to patrol.
I could tell you a few stories that would have your neck stand on end, but let's keep that for another night. What I would like to touch on, you had even the bikers. You had the Honda, Suzuki fans up at Leeuwkop. And if Dave Peterson was leading, you would hear the Suzuki guys. If it was a Honda in the lead, you'd hear the Rodney Gray supporters. And it was incredible to see big bike gangs arriving there and behave themselves. It was, I don't know, it was a fantastic atmosphere. Where have the crowds gone? Because those were fantastic days. You didn't know the guy next to you from a bar or soap, but you had great conversations all weekend. Some of them had to buy the newspaper on Monday to see who actually won the race, but they had a fabulous time there.
But as organizers, Patrick, we used to stoke that as well. So we used to, at drivers briefing, we'd say to the bike guys, look, if you throw your gloves over the fence into the crowd, we'll pay for a new pair. Or if you'll we once paid for Russell Wood's helmet. He stopped, I think, not at the S's. I think it was at Clubhouse. It could have been Sunset. We paid for a new helmet for him. He threw his helmet into the crowd. And we kind of like worked with our competitors. We used to say, come on, guys, let's put some fun in, you know. So don't just come idling back to the pits. Stop out there, engage with the crowds, throw your gloves into the crowd, and we'll replace your gloves. And I think we used to stoke the fires behind the scenes all the time because we had an agenda. We needed to get people through the gate, and you need to create this atmosphere. Atmosphere does come when the people are there. They create the atmosphere when they're there, but you got to get them there. And to get them there, you got to create a bit of sizzle and a bit of a wow factor. And then when they're there, it gets its own momentum. So we were always stoking away in the background and creating these stories about who was going to win and who'd insulted who at the last race. And the competitors enjoyed it because behind the scenes, they're all great mates. I mean, I remember in rallying, in the Nissan team would take an alternator out of the service van and give it to an opposing car to use. And that's so behind the scenes, there was always that camaraderie. But up front, yeah, we used to stoke it. You know, we used to say, come on, you guys we need to sizzle and attract the crowds. And once the crowds were there, well, you know, you guys took over.
Now people always say that the modern era is the reason why we've lost things like the massive crowds at the track. Competition has seen less motorsport on TV. Somehow this must be corrected again because motorsport is brilliant on TV. In your era, the TV coverage was actually excellent on rallies and on even at Kyalami and any racetrack. It was brilliant coverage. And that in itself created a vibe for the next race. You might be in the Cape, but you watch the Kyalami race. The next race is going to be at Killarney, so that builds the vibe for the next race. Why have we lost that?
Well, I think it became expensive because at the time there wasn't too much sport in South Africa. We were under, you know, I'm talking about sort of pre-94, so there was a shortage of material, and so the TV guys used to happily come along and bring their outside broadcast units and come and film because they are hour hungry. They've got to have content, and the content provided by motor racing is exhilarating and entertaining and very watchable. And what it made us do as organizers, we had to run on very tight schedules because if SABC was crossing to the race at 2:00, that race better start at 2:00. You can't be sitting in the pre-race start paddock, and that. So it kept our racing very tight and very organized. And I think that nowadays there's more content. There's too much content. So the TV channels have got the choice of what they show, where they show, and they're getting it basically for free. So I think that the problem is we need to come up with a plan where we can buy our time on television because we've got the product. We just got to get it on TV. And once you've proved again that you've got eyeballs watching and that people are enjoying their motor racing, then I think it'll come back to those days where it'll be on TV again a lot more because we've got the talent, we've got the product. We just need the budgets to get it back on TV.
And of course, we had our own local Murray Walker in Roger McCleary.
He's still our local Murray Walker. I mean, Roger is like a Wikipedia of motor racing in this country. There's not one thing that Roger hasn't been involved in or commented on or spoken to somebody. He is unique. Has he been on your show yet? I don't think so.
Not yet. No, not yet.
Let me tell you something. Roger will be entertaining because he's got stories that I think he could keep you going for 10 episodes.
Well, we'll certainly try and put him on, but he doesn't believe in the modern era of electronics, so we're going to have to somehow convince him to sit in front of the computer for a few hours.
Well, he's got a youngster. We got old Maloney coming up through the ranks there. You know, maybe Greg Maloney he's also got a couple of stories, and he's doing a good job. He's starting to cut his teeth on a lot of events, and I think he's going to become our next top motorsport commentator.
Very important element in motorsport. It's so important to have somebody talking sense while the racing is taking place.
Yeah. And sounding exciting. Yeah.
Absolutely. Making it sound like it's a thrilling race, even if there's only 2 cars on the track, which Roger was very good at.
He can do that with aplomb.
The other element that's always a topic of discussion. Are there too many categories in motorsport in South Africa? Would it not be better to have less categories and put more effort into those categories?
I think given the holding pattern that we have to go in, that is a valid comment, because we should have, I don't think we must have less categories, but we need to have them in different levels. So the national categories should be the ones that are attractive enough to draw back the manufacturers, because if you're going to have saloon car racing, it's great to have BMW and Audi and Volkswagen. Volkswagen are there, thank goodness, they've hung in all these years. But you need to have the Fords and the whole shooting scabanga there, so that they can use it as a product display area. The problem is that, of course, everybody can't win every day, and so it becomes difficult. But I think if we had national categories that were focused for the expensive forms of racing, but that we encouraged our club racing and our regional championships to accommodate all the guys, so that they don't have to pay excessive entry fees and spend more than half the budget just trying to enter the race. So you've got to have these different levels, and I think that will see us, because the grassroots will feed into the next level, the provincial level, and then the provincial or the regional level will feed into the national level. I think you need to have a strong saloon car, you need to have a strong open wheeler and a strong bike category, and you mix and match that together with your sort of Volkswagen Polo Cup Challenge. You can put together a really good menu of motor racing that will attract television sponsors, but Patrick, has to be managed. You can't let the stuff just go like a bushfire. I mean, you saw what bushfires in Cape Town do. It's devastating, and you've got to manage it. And unfortunately, at the moment, there seems to be a lot of vested agendas, and until somebody takes control of it and says, listen, let's calm this thing down and get it reorganized, yeah, it'll happen. It'll happen in rally, it'll happen in circuit racing, and in all of our other categories. Look how strong karting is at the moment, and even with the strength of karting, there are threats that are there with different types of motors and manufacturers and all that sort of thing. It just needs calm hands and a good orchestra to play the music, so all of our people can enjoy it, and not, it's like at the moment, it's like you've got the violinist is playing one tune and the drummer's beating another tune, and somebody else is blowing the trumpet at the wrong time. So there's too much noise. You need to just calm it down and say, this is the facts of life. This is where motor racing is in South Africa. Let's take a deep breath. Let's get the brain's trust in there, and let's sort this thing out and get it going again. It can be done.
My motorsport hero in South Africa was actually a Rhodesian or Zimbabwean in John Love. And that, if I'm going back to the single-seater side of things now, John Love, not only what he achieved on the track, but how he conducted his business on track, made him a big firm favorite in my book. Stopping a race to get McNichol's car sorted out before he goes for a championship. I'll always admire him for that. And I think that he really set the standard as far as I'm concerned with that. But he became a 6-time South African champion. Dave Charlton was a 6-time South African champion in Formula One. We had a domestic Formula One series, which was brilliant. It included Formula 5000, Formula 2, which eventually became Formula Atlantic, and saw Ian Scheckter take another 6 championships. Since then, it's as though the GTIs were good, but they never really lived up to expectations as far as the endurance of it is concerned. For all credit to Formula V, who's been around forever. Formula 4 has been brilliant. And as a matter of fact, I think those are two series that are possibly setting some kind of a standard in South African motorsport at the moment. The Formula Ford series at this stage is the richest in South African motorsport as far as awards are concerned. And I think it's right to have a single-seater category topping the charts. But what that's going to be is a different question.
Yeah, that's to get all the brains trust around a room and to agree it. I mean, if you think of the days of Formula Atlantic and we used to have to measure the sound at Kyalami because they were making too much noise, and we had all those decibel meters and had to check, and that's what motor racing is about. So you need that big thundering open wheel type, and that's where I think VSP in the beginning was also very successful. People love the sound of motors screaming and working and seeing the action and seeing the driver fighting the steering wheel. But there's a lot of work to be done to put that together. And I think what's happening, Patrick, in this country is if you think of club level racing and you see how strong that's getting and how cars are being dusted off, put back together and put into those events, I think we're going to actually see a resurgence in club racing and people then getting back into the whole love of the sport and sorting out the agendas and what they want to do. And off that basis, club racing at the moment is exceptionally strong and entertaining and got all the categories of sport at the moment, a lot of them running together in the same race, but all running comfortably. We used to have the old Castro Clubmans in the old days, just to get people to dust off their cars that were standing in the back of the garage. And I think we're going back to that, which is the reset button to plan and to let all of these new forms evolve and get our house in order, make sure our publicity is good, and whoever's going to do all that sort of stuff, I think it's a big challenge. It's going to need a youngster with a lot of dedication to get in there and make it happen. But it's there. I think the ingredients are there. The cake just needs to be baked.
There's two very different elements involved in South African motorsport as well. One, and I'm a keen supporter of that. Maybe it's got something to do with my age now as well. But I love the classic car scene. There's some brilliant cars being rebuilt, coming back from it's like reliving an era when you go to a track and you see a Batmobile or something like that.
Oh,
back on
an
the
old
circuit.
Flamingo. Old Flamingo,
Absolutely.
remember? Yeah.
And that's also allowed another new category, which has grown into an enormous status in for instance, now with the Simbola Hill Climb, where you can accommodate almost any type of car. That puts another different angle on South African motorsport that has become very popular.
I think that's probably another stepping stone or ladder. Ian Shrosby and his team down there in Knysna with that hill climb have done incredible things, because you can basically accommodate so many different categories, from open wheelers to saloon cars to specials to whatever you can put together within the rules can come out and run. And I think if we had a couple of those events, it would eventually regenerate enough cars and enough interest to sustain us over the next couple of years until everything settles and finds its own home. But there's that event is doing a lot of good for motor racing and just sustaining the interest and keeping cars that would have normally been sold overseas, or some of those cars would fetch good money, but they're being kept in South Africa. So it's keeping the heartbeat. The heartbeat is there. Now we just put some fillet on the bones, and we can have some fun again.
Well, at the same token, I must say it was fantastic to see the historic Grand Prix, Formula One Grand Prix in Monaco, and we saw the City's TS9 of John Love. I think that car, the only success he had is almost decapitating himself in Clubhouse. But yeah, this car took an international race win, and at the same time, it also had his Cooper Climax in the same race, with which he almost won the South African Grand Prix in 1967. So South African heritage can't be disputed. It's everywhere in world motorsport.
Well, Patrick, I think I'm going to throw this one at you. You need to find somebody who can put together a Goodwood type of event in South Africa. Can you imagine if we found a place where we could put on the Goodwood and bring all, I mean, our cars, the Piazza Musa cars and things are all going overseas to be on display there. If you look at the Tony Viana BMWs, Piazza Musa cars, all of these fantastic cars that we got, somebody needs to get off their butt and organize the South African equivalent of the Goodwood Festival. And I can tell you, that could be a lot of fun. That would certainly bring the heritage of South African motor racing back home. We don't have to go overseas to show off. And, I sound like I might have answers. I'm not the guy to do all this. I think there just needs to be somebody out there who sees the opportunity. I mean, you could turn that into a successful business, running a Goodwood South African type event. And they must, whoever's watching who wants to get out there and make a business of it, do it. Just do it. That's all I can say.
Well, I don't want to push the issue, but Wayne Harley's listening at the moment. There's a little plus spot that could be perfect for this. But the bottom line is, yes, I do agree with you. And I think the current exchange rate would make it a magic holiday for all these international people to visit South Africa. Indeed.
And put back into the sport, because, those guys bring their cars and some of them leave them here. They get bought, people share drives. It's a great concept. So I hope your friend is listening.
We're heading for an hour and a half, so we're going to have to think of our technical team behind the scenes. But I would like you to cover on one more subject tonight before we come to a close, and that is your current project with Jaguar and the bid to bring the E-Prix to Cape Town. You're going to have to give us the background on that. I must think that must be one of the questions that people would like answered most. Is it not?
Well, Patrick, I know you're going to try and put me under pressure for an answer, and I'm going to be very diplomatic here because, I regretfully can only take a small bit of credit for this. It's been run by a man who has done an absolutely amazing job. His name is Ian Banner. He used to look after all the Rothmans and other cigarette brands, sports sponsorship overseas. And so you'll remember the famous Rothmans Porsches, and those cars are just legendary. And was also a co-founder of the Laureus Awards. And his name is Ian Banner. And he had this vision to bring a Formula E to Cape Town. So he formed a company called E-Movement. And he got all his ducks in a row. He had a lot of meetings with the city of Cape Town and said, guys, I want to do this event. It's the future of green energy in the world, and we need to actually take Cape Town and position it as the African country that's going to lead this whole revolution and evolution. So Ian has done a sterling job. He's led a committee of people that have really got their backs in. The Formula E team did come out to Cape Town and do a feasibility study. So you have to pay for them to come and do a feasibility study. And they then assess the city and the country and see whether they would actually want to come here for a Formula E. So that was done. Ian spoke to me and said to me, would you like to assist us in just finding some seed money so that we can pay for this feasibility study and at least put some cash on the table so that we can try and make this happen for Cape Town. I went to Jaguar, and I must tell you that Jaguar have been incredible. They became a founding partner. They believed in the concept, and it's gone a long way down the track to actually attract and secure this event for Cape Town. It's in its very final negotiations. As I said to you, that feasibility study was very successful. The negotiations with the city have been very positive. There's negotiations with the residents because obviously it's a scale electrics type of event, and it maximizes itself on a street circuit. So whilst one would love to have brought this to a circuit like Killarney, it just doesn't show off the thrill of the event as much as putting it on a street circuit. And if you can imagine a street circuit around the stadium in Cape Town with a backdrop of the Atlantic on one side and Table Mountain on the other, it's going to be an event that's going to just give us all a breath of fresh air, and I think is going to assist in putting motorsport in South Africa back on the calendar. It's at its very final stages of negotiation, and I can tell you that once it is finalized, there will be a major announcement, and I'm really hoping for all the hard work that's been put in by everybody behind the scenes, because there's talk of major exhibitions involving e-motion, all the future of green energy, alternative energy is going to be built around this. So it's not only going to be a Formula E event. The package is one that is to make it sustainable. And if the team and led under Ian Banner can bring that to town, it's going to be fantastic. And it's not too far off from finalization. So I think that will be a really breath of fresh air for South Africa.
So by the time you phone me to say that you're willing to come back on the program, you'll have the answer for us.
Yeah, well, I think we've got to get Ian Banner on the program. He's the man who's done the footwork. I've just managed to find a bit of cash like we did with Yellow Pages. We know that helped to bring us the Yellow Pages in 1992. We had that K plan. And I think Ian Banner's also had a plan. So our K plan was to have the DTM race in 1990, the Formula One testing in 1991, and culminate with the South African Formula One Grand Prix in 1992. We had that plan, we executed it, and we had the Grand Prix. So that was exactly what Ian Banner has done. He's had a plan, he's known what he wants to do, he's involved the right people, and I have no reason to think that won't be successful, but we still need to hold our breaths for a short while.
Well, we certainly extend the invitation to Ian Banner to join us in the future. I would like to mention a few people in the background here. Ants Flock is saying, hello, Dave. Thanks for the chat today. Thanks for your contribution to motorsport. See you soon in Knysna. Of course, that's the Vlokkengat Museum in Knysna.
I promised them some of my trophies. Yeah, so I better step up to the plate.
He's certainly going to keep you on that one. That's no maybe. And then we have James Thompson, who has a question for Dave. Do you think Satcar killed off Westbank Modifieds as the pinnacle of local racing due to the costs, too expensive to develop a car in both series? Also, think Satcar 93-95 really put racing back on the map.
I don't think Satcar was killed by the V8s or vice versa. I think the problem is that Satcar became a manufacturer's platform, and as I said earlier in our discussion, it's very difficult when you've got manufacturers involved. The fact that V8s are still running very successfully, I know down in Cape Town, and I've seen them at Kyalami, the V8s are still there. They're still running very successfully, still entertaining the crowds, the flamethrowers, as I used to call them, because they throw out beautiful plumes of fire as they go through the gear. But I think that Satcar was like all things. There's a time to come and a time to go, and I think Satcar provided the manufacturers with their marketing platform that they wanted, and as soon as that had been achieved, they left. It became too expensive for privateers to continue with it. And then it started, becoming difficult to decide whether you must put your money in Satcar. So after the manufacturers left, it did become a bit of a watered down challenge between the V8s and Satcar. Satcar fulfilled their portion. The V8s are still going. I think there are these cycles. If you remember Group N, remember how strong Group N was when we had off-the-floor showroom cars racing. It's probably about time. I know that Sarel van der Merwe and a few other guys are talking about putting together another standard stock production car racing series. That needs to be done, and it'll evolve. It starts off as standard stock cars, stock car production cars. Then it goes to a little bit modified. Then it ends up with fat car, and then it resets and it goes back to production car. So I think that reset has happened. Maybe Sarel and the guys that are working on other ideas. I think Michele Lupini also had some ideas at one stage. So they will probably restart, and it will evolve and grow up into another big one, and then all implode and we start again. But that's what keeps the sport fresh.
We've got to first get Sarel out of his buckies at the moment. He's enjoying these buckies too much lately.
Yeah, he's Spirit of Africa.
But there's and I believe he's going to contest this one, but he's got a beautiful Ford Escort that we can get him back into rallies with.
Indeed, that's why that Goodwood Motor Show is so important. Can you imagine? I saw that on Facebook that there's and all these old cars, that old Quattro, the Fords, those BDAs, the Atlantics, that Formula Atlantic was one of the best formulas we ever had. Those cars sounded beautiful. They're still there. They parked in garages, and I think the South African Goodwood would get them all dusted off.
Incredible to see that we had the Piazza Musso Ford going to Goodwood. Now this year we'll see two S2000 Toyotas from the South African Rally Championship, Serge Damso and Johnny Gemmell cars that's going to be presented at Goodwood. And of course the RST 1700 Turbo Serge Damso is also overseas. So once again, like Formula One, there's a great South African heritage now finding exposure internationally.
Yeah. Well, you think of that Skyline that Hannes Grobler and his team at Nissan built, the rally car. It was a world one-off, and that car gave the Quattro a run for its money. I mean, it's just phenomenal that we have the expertise. If you see what Glenn Hall is doing with his Dakar factory and everything, we have got everything in this country. We must just get our ducks in a row.
You've just opened another can of worms now, because that's a favorite topic of mine. We had a real boermaker plan attitude in South African motorsport. You had Hannes Grobler creating Langleys with 2.8 liter motors in it. That was spectacular on rallies. You had a 500 horsepower monster Skyline on the circuit. All these cars that shouldn't have existed but became very popular as race cars. It became iconic in the world of motorsport. Shouldn't that be brought back into South African motors? Give these guys an opportunity to be creative and build something fantastic again.
Yeah, they are. There are a couple of workshops around. I mean, Glenn is doing an amazing job globally with these cars. And I think up in Kyalami Business Park, there's a couple of guys who really are putting and selling in the Middle East and selling around the world. So it is there. And there's room for expansion, because we do make a plan and we do put together good cars and good product.
Well, we have to put in another program for these guys with Dakar. I think Dakar is becoming a South African motorsport event in the north of Africa, because there's so many South African content there. You have the Nissans are built here, the Toyotas are built here, the Fords are built here, and we've got some excellent South African drivers and crews going over there. We've had the Alfie Coxes and brilliant guys on bikes and quads. We have the talent.
Because Van Deventer on his quad. He used to take his quad in his hand luggage overseas. I mean, amazing stories.
We have to get these guys back up and running again. And I see there's another question here from Dennis Pillay, who asks, who was Des Ali? Now, that's another topic we can touch on somewhere in the future.
I'll tell you something. He is a whole legend. Him and the Domingos. You remember the Domingo family? They were absolutely Des Ali. I mean, that is another subject. We don't have enough hours to talk about those guys and their abilities and the way they supported motorsport. I see. I've now been squared and quartered. I've said it on social media.
He's found you. You can't hide away from this guy.
Oh my goodness! Oh well. I don't know why he uses trophies with a plural. I've got one trophy. No,
I
I've got
think
to
you said you owe him trophies, so you did it to yourself.
Okay, yeah, no, he's got me. He's got me, Patrick.
Dave, it's been an absolute honor. I sincerely hope this is not the last time we're going to speak to you. You have an open invitation to come back on. There are books to fill with what you can tell, and we look forward to another opportunity. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Patrick, and to the viewers and everybody. It's just been such a pleasure. And you know what? I don't want to come back too quickly because there's just so many guys in our world of motorsport with stories to tell you. They must all come. They must all come and have a chance to share their memories with you and your great team. Thank you for the privilege and the honor.
No, it's our privilege, and it's so great to leave this on social media for people to enjoy in the future. Yeah, keep up the good work. I hope you create another Kyle Army, bring us another 10 Grand Prix. But we are looking forward to that announcement, and we'll definitely get you back for that.
Thank you, Patrick, and thanks to your team behind the scenes.
Well, thanks, Byron, in the background, our technical guy looking after the program, the 435 Oils and BH Media. They keep this program on air. And, well, I do believe Byron might have another clip with which we can close tonight. And we look forward to seeing you on the next program. Thank you very much for joining us.
Okay, put that on record.
And the championship?
It'll go to Lewis.
Lewis Hamilton?
Yeah, it'll go to him. I mean, he wants 7. He wants to retire on the top like Nico did.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's my prediction.
To Dave McGregor, Hamilton to equal the great Michael Schumacher. All right, let's talk about South Africa.
Some good breaking news for you too.
Just a bit. Formula
Right.
E
Yeah.
is coming to South Africa. Talk to us about it. You are at the top of organizing that.
You know, this is just such a great opportunity. Jaguar South Africa is supporting E-Movement, which is a bid company that's put together a bid to host the street circuit Formula E. It's called an E-Prix in Cape Town. Not sure when exactly yet, but they found 3 circuits that can work. They've done the feasibility study, and now the negotiations start both with Formula E and with the city of Cape Town to make sure that, you know, the roads can be used. But it's great for South Africa, great for Cape Town, and it's E-Movement. It's all about the future of green energy. So, I mean, what better event to put on in the mother city?
And a lot of people don't understand that. Tell us what you mean by green energy, because this is seemingly the future of motor racing when it comes to conservation and all of that.
Well, I think a lot of our viewers are going to say, well, I'm a petrol head and I want to hear that sound. You know, when we were kids, you used to put a piece of cardboard on the spokes on your bicycle to make it sound like a motorbike. And I think we've got to accept that the world is... I, as a kid, used to play scale electrics. Now, if you think of scale electrics, that's exactly what Formula E is. It's all about electric motors, clean energy. It's the way the world is going. Yes, there'll always be the petrol heads, but I think that it's a new genre that's coming to watch Formula E. It's good for the sport, and it's good for the future, and it's great for South Africa. If we can put that event on, man, oh man, I can tell you something. We will be top of the world.
We're hoping, Dave, but do we have South Africans going in there? Are we just going to look at Australians and Brits and everyone racing there? Do we have South Africans who are competing at that level?
Well, you know what's nice at the moment? We've got Brad Binder, who's competing in MotoGP at the top level. We've got the Van der Linde kids who are racing in DTM. We've got Aberdeen that's racing as well. We've got so many South Africans racing overseas at the moment that it's actually quite astounding. We're boxing way above our weight in terms of where we should be. And Van der Linde just tested at Marrakesh. There was a Formula E race at Marrakesh a week ago. He tested and he was the fastest rookie. So I have no doubt that there'll be South Africans in those Formula E cars in Cape Town. You can also write that down on the back of your cigarette box.
Everything is recorded, Dave. We are hoping that it'll happen. So you say the date should not yet confirmed?
No, these things are all an arm wrestle. You always, when you're negotiating a deal like this, which Ian Banner, the chairman of the E-Movement, is doing, you've got to, it's who's going to blink first. There's obviously a lot of countries that like to host it. So it's a big negotiation, and obviously one wants to get the city properly involved. You need to involve ratepayers. You need to make sure that this thing is done properly. It's not a one-off. Yeah. It's going to happen for 5 years, so let's do it properly and leave a legacy.
Wow. We are looking forward to that, Dave, and we are hoping that when the news is there of when the date is, you're coming here.
I'll be in this chair.
To Newsroom Africa to break that bit of news as to when we will be hosting the Prix here in Cape Town, South Africa. That's Dave McGregor talking to me about everything that has to do with the motorsport. Well, remember, you can also contribute to